Okay, so I've got a new little setup today. No whiteboard. We're just going with Google Earth and some web browser. So Germany is having a bit of an energy crisis right now, along with most of the rest of Europe. Hungary's doing okay because of solar and some renewables. Norway's doing, I think, is pretty good. But Germany is hurting because of the heat and drought that we talked about. The Danube River is very low, having a hard time using it for energy production, everything like that. Now, the reason why is because Germany gets a lot of their energy from Russia, and Russian energy has been getting absolutely hammered. So there used to be a pipeline somewhere over in this area called the Nord Stream pipeline, or the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, that got blown up. That an accident occurred back in like 2022 or something that resulted in the end of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Um, and right now, Ukraine is having its moment in the sun, and it is going on an absolute spree against Russian energy. Now, it's been a slow, methodical approach. I'm going to break down why I think that there's a longer term strategy to this. Obviously, there is. I mean, they're a war, and they're doing very well for right. This is Ukraine, and then Russia is like can fit it all on the map without going so high that it's screwed by little clouds. Um, anyway, so for the past year or so, Ukraine has been using long range drones to attack Russian oil refineries. Now, refineries are facilities where oil sits in big vats, and the different density, and it is separated out based on its density. And then you've got your heavy oil, lighter oil, and you've got diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, all the way through. And there's a bunch of stuff in there, it's used for all kinds of different things, but that's where you get all of your value-added products. What you use to drive, things that go on fertilizer, jet fuel, everything. Right, so Ukraine has been able to bypass Russian air defenses and blow up a lot of these facilities on this southwestern corridor where they are very concentrated. And there's a reason why they're concentrated over there. It's just geographical in nature. We're going to get to that. And part of the reason why Ukraine's been successful is also geographical in nature, and it's not something that Russia can really change without a lot of investment, which they don't have. They don't have money to invest because their economy is tanking because they are devoting so many resources to blowing up Ukraine. So essentially, Ukraine's been using long-range drones, and the way that you can use they can use these long-range drones is the drone itself has a travel radius of so many kilometers, right, 50, 100, whatever, guided by a person. But then, now this is where it starts to get kind of crazy. You have a chip, an AI chip in the drone, which has a decision tree of about up to 10,000 decisions, where it will just keep flying in the general direction that it was originally sent in until it identifies a target or a number of targets, and then it will use that decision tree to identify the highest level target and then go and blow up that target. And so these drones, they can have a range of 1,500 kilometers. And so it has been a strategic targeting of Russian oil refineries up to in the past couple of weeks. Lots of happened in the past few weeks. Big developments here, big developments down here, and then as well as a lot of fire and stuff over here and over here. Oh, also, like 60,000 Moroccans jumped a border into the Spanish territory right here. Originally, I thought they crossed the actual strait. They did not, but called Ceuta. Like 60 or 70,000 people went, I think, this way. Oh, sorry, we can't see the pointing. Like this, around and swam around the border in Ceuta. So lots going on over there. Some people are saying the U.S. was involved or Israel, because Spain is one of the countries not allowing the U.S. and Israel to use their airspace to attack Iran. But anyway, the way that these Ukrainian drones are able to get through here is because, one, Russia, as I stated before, is huge. That is usually an advantage in wars, especially because Russia is also cold, which means any kind of advance becomes a logistical nightmare. Because you have to trek all the way. Let's see, if you were going to march from Kiev to Moscow, it's 750 kilometers, right? And you can just get bombarded the whole way. Your supply lines get stretched out. Famously, Napoleon and Adolf Hitler failed at taking Moscow for that reason. But in modern warfare with long-range drones that can reach double that distance, we have seen attacks in Moscow, by the way. It creates a big issue with covering this distance with air defenses, right? Here's your border with Ukraine. And you have to defend that whole thing. Plus, then there is Belarus, where you have to prevent them flying around Belarus. It's a whole nightmare. So you got to do this way we're up here. Now, Russia has energy and fuel depots as well as other natural resource hubs located all around this essentially continent. They basically have half the Eurasian continent. But with those drones, they can overwhelm the air defenses, which have to be placed very strategically at these locations. So if you here's why they can't defend the whole border. Let me pause, rewind. Russia cannot defend this border against drones, right? You'd think you could just Crimea. This right here is Crimea. That's going to be very important to our conversation. But you'd think that you could just set up your air defenses like this. And prevent all advancement of drones out of Ukraine. Now, the issue is that drones are very small and they're hard to see even for radar. So you have to spread your radar very densely, right? You have to have very dense radar. They don't have enough resources for that. On top of that, you have dense radar. You create a target-rich environment, which Ukraine can then bomb with artillery. So you get kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You do this, and then you just make yourself a sitting duck. So their alternative strategy is they cluster their air defenses around key locations like Moscow. But what that does is it allows it allows a swarm of drones, right? Because the air defenses are all spread out, Ukraine can take a ton of drones, swarm them onto one air defense, overwhelm it, take it out, and then use that to advance further. And you think, well, so there's Russian interceptors, they can overwhelm the interceptors. There's Russian jammers. That's important because, one, jammers don't work against the AI drones. It is essentially a hard-coded decision tree. You can't jam it. It's not getting a signal from anywhere. It is an entirely internal decision-making process, local to the hardware on that drone. So it is entirely autonomous, not able to be jammed with current technology. The other issue is now that these oil refineries are out of commission, there are fuel shortages, which is very bad for Russia in multiple ways. One, they don't have enough diesel to comfortably use their entire logistics chain of trains and highways. They're very train heavy because this is all plains, right? The Mongols, there's Mongolia, came all the way up to like this point, like right around there, on horseback, because that is all plains, right? Once they got to Western Europe, I don't remember where exactly, but somewhere around here where it starts to get really mountainous and forested, their strategy of shooting people with arrows from horseback just couldn't keep advancing because the terrain was not effective. Now we're seeing a kind of similar thing, these huge dead zones. And right now there's basically a massive dead zone here, and another was turning into a dead zone in this little peninsula. That is one of the topics for today. This is called Crimea. Vladimir Putin had his honeymoon here. It was annexed into Russia, claimed or whatever. It's occupied territory by Russia since 2014. And then we get to the big story for today, the Sea of Azov. Now, the Sea of Azov is critical for Russian logistics because this is where they export all of their fuel to Europe, right? You go from the Sea of Azov through the Kerch Strait into the Black Sea, through the Bosporus Strait. Yeah, that's what it's called, Bosporus. Bosporus Strait through Turkey. I'm not sure what this strait is called. Another strait, right? There's lots of straits right here. Into the Mediterranean. You're home free. Bring it up. Pop it into Slovenia, Hungary, Germany, wherever, right? Or just come around, pop it straight into Germany. You've got yourself the European market to sell into. Now, there's other alternatives that Russia has. They've been investing pretty heavily in the Northwest Passage, which looks like this, or sorry, Northeast Passage. The Northern Sea Route is what they call it. They have an icebreaker fleet, but it's still pretty much inaccessible outside of summer. Now, but they use this to export oil to China. But there's also a big logistics issue here because you have to get your oil all the way from Siberia up there, through all of this crap. It's not crap, all this land, distance, through all these miles and kilometers. Now, Ukraine, what they've been doing, one, separate the refineries. That means Russia has to export crude oil to foreign refineries and then import value-added fuel and fertilizer products that have been refined. So the value add happens elsewhere. And now, one, that was a damper on global oil markets. That's one of the reasons why after this Ukraine thing, you have not seen oil go through the roof, because at the same time, Russia has been forced to export more oil and less fuel, right? That's where the story is coming long term, is this is a fuel and fertilizer story, not an oil story, because the big bottleneck is the refineries. There's been massive underinvestment by most oil companies into refining because they've been paying out big dividends. They haven't been reinvesting into the actual production, stock buybacks and dividends, right? It's part of the hyper-financialization. Two, Russian refineries blown up, Iranian refineries blown up, Kuwait, Oman, UAE, Qatar, Qatar, all that blown up. So Ukraine, stage two. Now Russia has to forced to export more of their oil and then import more fuel. Now, yeah, they lose on the spread there financially, but it's not crippling to them. Stage two, the Sea of Azov. This is why it is so vital. See this river? Right, there's a river, and through a series of locks, and dams, this river. Sorry, I'm using my finger. This river connects to the Caspian Sea, and it is navigable. It's a navigable waterway. You've got the Caspian Sea. Now, the Caspian Sea is where all of this southwestern Russian oil goes into the Caspian Sea because it gets brought from Siberia by train, by rail, down to here into Caspian Sea. Now, from the Caspian Sea, you can go to Iran, you can come back from Iran, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, all of these Central European, Middle Eastern countries, or you can go through these locks into Sea of Azov, into the Black Sea, and then out, right? So, first step, Ukraine's overwhelmed Crimea. People are leaving Crimea in the thousands. They are destroying all the bridges in Ukraine. They are basically making Crimea uninhabitable. They're not trying to take it. They are just destroying the logistics situation here. Basically overwhelming the air defenses with swarms and blowing it up. It's that simple. And this cuts off Russia. One, terrible PR because it's like the pinnacle of Russian advancement. And two, it is able to cut off Russia from the Black Sea. Now we'll get to that because remember what I said about that dense radar and interceptors? That is doable on land with investment. On water, it's not doable. There's just too much space to cover on the water, right? So all Ukraine needs is small little boats, just like what we've been seeing in Iran. These little fast boats drive around, and then they can launch drones from the boat and hit targets over the water. Now, once Crimean defenses, again, this peninsula here is Crimea. That's Crimea. Once that has been taken out, Russia calls it their unsinkable aircraft carrier. Once that is out of commission, long-range drones are free to go and just bombard the Sea of Azov, right? Now the Sea of Azov, once again, is Russia's access point to the Black Sea. So, how do they do that? Because this is a shallow sea, right? So they need shallow water crude carriers or shallow water tankers, right? These are smaller, they can operate in the shallow water, and then they make trips, right? From Russia through the Kerch Strait, meet up with tankers in the Black Sea, make a few trips, load up the super tankers, and then the super tankers traverse the rest of the way, right? So what Ukraine has done, hundreds of attacks in Sea of Azov, basically just taking it totally out of commission. So at this point, it's becoming very, very difficult for Russia to access the Black Sea. But on top of that, they are blowing up these limited number of smaller tankers that can operate in the Sea of Azov. There's a very similar situation down here in the Gulf, Persian Gulf, and the Red Sea. Primarily, this is the Red Sea, right? Straits closed over Hormuz. The Houthis are threatening the Bab el-Mandab. And so you've got the Suez Canal. Well, things sound all hunky-dory, but the Suez Canal cannot be traversed by super tankers. It's actually traversed by a special kind of ship called Suezmaxers. If you're into maxing, what's maxing, whatever maxing, you've got Suezmaxers, right? And they go back and forth through the Suez Canal, meet up in the Mediterranean, load it up, and do ship-to-ship transfers, right? If you want to learn more about this, just look up what's going on with shipping. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name, but the YouTube channel is called What's Going On with Shipping. Anyway, so once the defenses are off of Crimea, Ukraine essentially can control the Sea of Azov, and the next comes the Black Sea. They're already launching attacks on the Black Sea, and what they're doing is, so Russia has a shadow fleet of crude oil and refined product carriers that basically, in order to avoid Russian sanctions. Now, this is how Ukraine is saying that it's not civilians, because they're saying they're just enforcing the sanctions, which the U.S. has imposed, and they're just enforcing them, which is actually true. Now, the shadow fleet is a fleet of typically very old, kind of run-down ships, which fly under the radar. They have no transponders, and they will put up any flag and say they're from any country as it suits them. And they use labor largely from Southeast Asia and Africa, where they can hire very cheaply and probably have some human rights violations and things like that. That's not here nor there. Basically, the point is they have their transponders off. So every ship has a transponder that tells everyone, you just go look it up, where they are, right? The shadow fleet turns these off, so you can't find them. So what Ukraine does is they just look at all the ships with transponders, then they use U.S. satellite intelligence, and, well, maybe it's not U.S., but they use satellite intelligence. So basically just a satellite that takes a picture of the Black Sea, and they see where all the ships are. And then they go back to where the transponders are coming from, and then they can figure, okay, any ship that doesn't have a transponder on, shadow fleet vessel. Send the boat, and again, with these fast strikes, small drones, and then they're not trying to sink these ships that cause environmental hazards or anything. They're just taking them out of commission, hitting the engine rooms, making them have to just sit there. They go hit the ship, and they're out, and it's these asymmetric tactics similar to what we're seeing in Iran, right? And so what's working in both Iran and Ukraine are one, asymmetric warfare tactics, small, cheap, fast, and targeting choke points, right? These are more, as you can see, there's more straits. It's all about maritime choke points, logistics, shipping, and critical infrastructure. Two, underground infrastructure, subterranean, right? Palmer Luckey was early to this, very early. He said a few months ago, he was saying before we go to space and have space wars, the next theater of combat is going to be subterranean, right? Ukrainian drone production, underground. Iranian drone production, underground, right? All of it is underground. And they use these fast, small strikes, swarm strikes to overwhelm defenses that are designed for stopping large intercontinental ballistic missiles and things like that. Now, recently we've seen kind of an interdiction, a coming together of these two wars. As Ukraine struck an Iranian ship all the way over in the Caspian Sea, right? See, the Caspian Sea allows Russia to ship things straight to Tehran, into the Persian Gulf, and then out into the ocean, right? So there are shipping routes that way. And it goes both ways. Now, Iran gave Russia permission. I guess they gave them the design Shahed drones. But the thought is they didn't give them the full design. They wanted to keep some of their bargaining power, and so they gave them a mostly complete design where Russia put together most of the parts that are like steel, plywood, aluminum, all that stuff. And then the small critical components Iran will ship to Russia, and then they can finish the assembly like that. Now, Ukraine blew up the ships from Iran. Iran is not happy about it. It was in the Caspian Sea. And they alleged that it was shipping those critical components for the Shahed drones to Russia. Another thing they've been doing, they've been blowing up, what is it, wheat berries? Wild berries? I think it's called wild berries. It's essentially Russia's version of Amazon, because it's actually been through private, well, what's private in Russia? It's all, it's oligarchy, so they're all kind of public-private partnership deals, but wild berries is essentially Russian Amazon. That's how they were navigating the logistical breakdown of for getting their all their stuff, their military equipment, drone equipment, communications equipment, etc. Now, these are some of the rail lines, and like I said, Russia is very rail heavy, and this has been another target of Ukraine. It's absolutely decimating the southwestern portion of Russian rail lines. And so here, I'm going to just pop this up. You can read this as I wrap up. But essentially, what I'm saying here is what we're seeing is sort of a rebalancing in favor of smaller powers, at least for now. The U.S. is starting to invest in this drone infrastructure, and every country is going to be investing in this drone infrastructure, as well as the subterranean infrastructure and manufacturing for drones and missiles, right? Because that's what works. That's what we're seeing. That's what works in Ukraine and Iran. Secondly, I might have to pause and think. Secondly, there's two reasons the oil shock hasn't happened. One is Russia has been forced to export oil and import fuel. So that puts a downward pressure on oil, but it puts an upward pressure on refined products, right? As I was saying earlier, the bottleneck is the refineries. Second is China. China has like some kind of crazy stockpile like 1.4 billion barrels worth or something of oil, and so they've just cut their demand way down. China's China's on kind of the leading edge of electrification, EV stuff, all that, and so China's been able to cut down on their oil imports, which has kept the lid on oil prices. Because I think they're just waiting. They're just waiting until the U.S. depletes their strategic petroleum reserve, and then they're going to use the savings from not buying the oil to start ramping up the pressure. But they won't even have to at that point. It'll just happen on its own. So oil, I'm not saying oil won't go higher, but what I am saying is refineries are the bottleneck. This story is larger than oil because the refineries in Russia and the Middle East are being destroyed. That leaves the United States and a few other places. And what you can see when this is all over, I thought you were going to see a lot more investment into production from like Venezuela, Canada, the United States basins. I mean, Permian Basin is hurting. I mean, look, it's got a lot of oil there. It's got a lot of oil there still, but just relatively to how it has been in the past, it's we're using it. It's going to be gone. 2030s. That's our upper ceiling. And if we're not well on the road to alternatives by then, you're going to see another oil crisis like this. But it's going to be structural, and there's no amount of taco that can flip it over because it's just going to be there's not enough. We can't get it at a reasonable expense. So nuclear, renewables, all that, but mostly just decentralize your energy, start making your own energy. That's my thought on it. But for trading, I still like Chevron. Chevron has been really bad about just paying out big dividends and not investing, but they've got a stranglehold on Venezuela. They've got a stranglehold on Venezuela, and they've got the refineries in the Permian Basin that can handle the heavy sour crude from Venezuela, from Canada. That's another one. The Canadian Shield, Alberta, trying to get that pipeline. They're working hard to get that pipeline to the ocean. They've already got one to Texas, but their oil just trades at a huge discount because they don't have any other choice but to sell it to the markets in Texas. It's a closed market. So there's some opportunities up there for energy companies if you're an investor. If anybody has any tips on Venezuela, we went there for a reason. It's like I'm not, I don't have the power over this, but the United States, which is where I happen to live, is using its military to turn itself into a colonial petro state. It's not a good time to do that. Well, I mean, it's a pretty good time to do that, but just the choice of petroleum is not a great choice because we're going to be out of it. We're going to run out of it. So it'll be the U.S. and Russia slugging it out in the petroleum realm, and China flying away on electrification. Same with the AI race, right? They're talking about the AI race, the chips, is all about the chips. Our grid can't handle the amount of energy it's going to take to run that amount of compute, at least not right now. And people say, well, it's going to get more efficient. The compute's going to get more efficient. Whose paradox is that? It's not really Fermi. No, Fermi paradox is something totally different. It's about going to space. God, basically, when things get more efficient, you don't demand less of them, you demand more because you get new uses for them, and more people use them, and you get an increase in total demand. It happened with gasoline and automobiles and train, everything. It's happened with. So China, they're not there on the chips. That doesn't matter because they're the ones who are actually going to be able to run the data centers and train the models. And so far, all they're doing is they're just letting the U.S. companies hold the bag on the chips, which are depreciating, and pour all this investment into these companies, and then they're just taking those models that the U.S. companies make, training their models on those models, and then open sourcing it. So it's really like, in my opinion, the U.S. AI companies don't have a leg to stand on. And it's when the energy crunch comes, that's when China's going for Taiwan. That's when they're going to get the chips, and when they have the chips and the electricity, they win. Right? That's it. There's nothing we can do. So the U.S. we're investing into some of these AI drone types of things, but just move to New Zealand. Just move to New Zealand and build your own bunker. Go underground. It's where everything's going. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about next. Might go with Iran. Might go with something else, but I hope that made sense as far as Ukraine's plan. I know I always ramble. I just go back and forth on these things, like jumping around point, but it's like not linear. Yeah, and I say way too much as well. But just as a quick overview, what we went over, because of primarily geography, secondarily resources and technology, Russia cannot defend against these long-range drones. Ukraine is using that to sink the unsinkable aircraft carrier that is Crimea, assert their control over the Sea of Azov, and then by proxy, and as well, they're just ramping up this Black Sea crackdown. And like I said, Russia, they do have a couple ways around it, right? But here's the thing. This is why. Right, so here's their northeast passage, their North Sea route, right? Through the Bering Strait or around this way, whatever. And then they come down to South China, whatever. Is that their rail lines? See, these rail lines, they head up there, right? So you've got rail lines and you connect the ships and everything, even up here, right? So everything that comes from Siberia, you're good. But all this it doesn't connect. So you're in a real pickle because now all the infrastructure in the southwestern region is useless. All of the grain, you don't get any grain exports. You've seen a big uptrend in wheat because of these attacks, and they're just getting started. So Russia is in a big pickle right now. They got to figure this out, or they're gonna lose. I mean, it's basically as simple as that. And the U.S., we're essentially in the same boat as Russia is against Ukraine. We're in that boat with Iran. not quite as bad, but because we don't have a border, so Iran can essentially only exert their pressure on the United States through indirect measures. But in every way that this war in the Middle East is being fought, the U.S. is losing. So anyway, that's all. Uh, that is the story for maritime choke points in Central Europe and how it relates to energy markets. Oh, and mostly it was about war, I guess, and that was caused by war. But there you go. Hopefully this audio comes out. Fingers crossed. Yeah. I'll stop recording.